All right, everybody, because I can. I'm going to go ahead and convene this meeting of the West Hollywood Planning Commission for Thursday, August 16th. This is a regularly scheduled meeting. We are going to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Who do I spy with my little eye who would like to give the Pledge of Allegiance? I don't see. Let's see. Who is in the audience that I can ask to do this? Is Jake Stevens here? Nope, he was. He's in the. Nope, it's okay. We won't bother him. Jim Arnone, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Secretary Gillig, can you please do roll call for us?
Good evening. Tonight, Commissioner Guy is absent. The voting record will reflect that in the minutes. Commissioner Huppengarner?
Present.
Commissioner Buckner?
Present.
Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Elchel?
Here.
Vice Chair Carvalero?
Here.
Chair Jones?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. I would actually like to make a request, unless I hear any stringent objection, that we move item 12A, the catch update. This is unfinished business, 8715 Melrose Avenue, up to after consent and before our public hearings.
I would be content putting it on consent. I was going to make the motion we put it on consent.
I think it should stay where, as a public hearing, we may have people come.
I'd like to, if you're okay with this, just because of the amount of feedback that we've gotten of late, I would feel more comfortable with allowing folks to comment. I know people take time out of their evenings to come to these meetings, so if there is anyone who wants to comment on that, I'd like to keep it a public hearing. Commissioner Bass, if you're all right with that.
I'm fine with moving it up on the agenda, but not onto consent.
Can't hear.
She's fine with moving it up on the agenda, but not to consent.
So we have a vote, aye, all in favor?
It's not a vote item, it's up to you.
We'll just take a, do we need to move it?
No, you can do it.
Yeah, okay, so it looks like it's so moved. Next is approval of the minutes. I believe we do have one change to the draft minutes of August 2nd, 2018.
Yes, staff has one correction. On page 2 of 16, on the third, or the first paragraph after the voting, it says Chair Elchel, which I should actually say Commissioner Elchel. So staff will make that correction.
Great, thank you. Item 6 is public comment. David, do we have any public comment?
Oh, first we need to vote on the minutes.
Oh, that's my bad.
We have Commissioner Bass moved and seconded by Commissioner Huppengarner.
Thank you for keeping me in line. That happens sometimes.
And the motion passes unanimously as amended.
Thank you. Lest I get too ahead of myself, again, item 6 is public comment. Do we have any public speakers, David?
No, we have no public comment at this time.
Thank you. Item 7 is director's report.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. John Kehoe, Interim Director for Planning and Development Services. Just two quick announcements. One is the Commission may want to pay attention to Council on Monday night. That night we have the 8920 Sunset Boulevard, the Arts Club project is going to the City Council for their public hearings. That's taking place on Monday. And then also David Gillig will be in contact with the commissioners regarding possible CEQA training, so you may want to avail yourself of CEQA training. Those are my announcements.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Director Kehoe? No? All right, otherwise we'll move on to items from commissioners. Before I do, I just want to say that apparently, I'm going to take responsibility for this. I don't know what my magical power is, but I think that there's some issue with the parking validator. So if any of you had issues validating or it said internet unavailable, David Gillig here can help you with a validation, just putting that out there. Any items from commissioners at this time?
Just one.
Sure.
I want to thank staff for updating the website so that now long-range planning, the full content of the staff reports are available online. So for the public, you're used to sort of being able to get that for Planning Commission, but now you can get it for long-range planning, and I'm hoping design review someday soon. So thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Altschul.
There is a mailer out for an update on CEQA training that's coming up, I think, in September. But John Kehoe also mentioned that there is going to be a 2-day CEQA training, which is not an update, but it's CEQA, sort of CEQA 1A, which I would recommend that any of us here that have not taken basic CEQA training should take that course. It's a 2-day course, and it's very beneficial. So consider it.
Any other comments from commissioners? I have just one. I just want to thank staff. I know that these have recently been updated. These are the mailers that we receive for when you're within, I believe, 500 feet of a project or are otherwise noticed. It used to be kind of just a folded piece of paper. It's now a lovely postcard. Keep an eye out for these, just so you know what they look like. It gives the address and I have it upside down, description of the project. I did have a question for staff. Are we able to include a picture of the project on the actual mailer? I know that the one that went out for Arts Club for council, the upcoming council hearing had it. Is there a way that we can squeeze it on?
Yeah, normally we do. I'm not sure which one you have up there, but yeah, there should normally be a rendering of the project included on the postcards.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. I'm just giving everyone a notice to keep an eye out for those. All right, we have 2 items on consent. Items 9A and B. 9A is a zone text amendment for top floor setbacks in R3C and R4B districts. 9B is a zone text amendment for projects spanning commercial and residential districts. Unless there are any comments or requests to poll, I'd like to move these.
Moved by Commissioner Bass, seconded by Chair Jones. And the consent calendar is approved unanimously.
Great, thank you. So proceeding on with item 12A, again, this would have been unfinished business. This is 8715 Melrose Avenue. This is an update on Catch.
Thank you, Chair Jones and members of the commission. I'm Adrian Gallo with the city's current planning division. I'm going to present the 6-month operational review of Catch Restaurant. At the last review in February, Catch agreed to install a glass sound wall along a portion of the Melrose Avenue frontage. The commission directed staff to perform another review in 6 months. After the installation of the glass sound wall was completed, the restaurant completed the glass sound wall installation on June 15th. A site inspection and inquiry to the State Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control and Los Angeles County Sheriffs and the pertinent City of West Hollywood departments revealed no problems whatsoever with the operation of this restaurant. The ABC and Sheriff's Department reported that there had been no problems associated with this restaurant over the past 6 months. The Code Compliance Division showed no cases currently open. They responded to a single noise complaint from the restaurant on May 29th, but the responding officer did not hear a violation. Additionally, a review of their MCUP for compliance with all of their conditions was conducted. It was found that the restaurant was compliant with all conditions. Over the last 6 months, there have been no problems associated with the restaurant. Staff recommends the commission receive and file this report with no action taken. I am available for questions along with the city's code compliance manager. Thank you.
Great, thank you. David Gillig, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, great, thank you. Going once, going twice.
I'd like to say something.
Sure, please, Commissioner Buckman.
I know that it's been a long process for this applicant, and they've come back before us several times, and I'm really glad to hear that in this last 6 months that it seems like things have pretty much been worked out, and I think that's a good thing for both the restaurant, the business, and the neighbors. So I congratulate everybody on moving this and taking the steps that we need to take to make it work out for the community, because this particular restaurant is a very popular restaurant and brings a lot of people into West Hollywood. So I just think I'm glad that we eked it out over a long period of time until we got it right.
Thank you. Commissioner Altschul?
Adrian, was the wall finished?
Yes,
As of when?
June 15th.
Thank you.
Any other comments from any other commissioners? No? Okay, I guess we'll just close the public hearing at this point and call the question unless we have any changes or updates. It's really just a receive and file, correct?
Right.
It's
Is
just
there
a
any
receive and file.
subsequent review scheduled?
Yeah, I was going to say, are there any subsequent updates or reviews scheduled?
This is the last review.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't think we need to vote, do we?
Just accept, receive and file, accept.
Just receive and file. Do we need to make a motion to?
No, you don't. It's just a
Okay.
receive and
Okay.
file, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, moving right along to public hearings. Item 10A is 938 North Genesee Avenue.
Good evening, Chair Jones and members of the Commission. My name is Antonio Castillo, Associate Planner with the Planning Division. The item before you this evening is a request for a subdivision of a recently approved 7,400 square foot, 3-story, 5-unit building over a single subterranean parking level. The 6,500 square foot site is located at 938 North Genesee Avenue, 3 properties south of Romaine Street. Approval of the application will allow the townhouse type development to be subdivided into multiple ownership. The building was administratively approved on June 21st of this year under a development permit after findings were made that the development met all applicable development standards and was consistent with the general plan. The item tonight is for the subdivision request only. All subdivision applications must be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission at a hearing after making the required findings. Since the development was approved administratively, the development itself, including development standards and design, are not before you this evening. It's staff's assessment that the subdivision of this building of the subdivision will not be detrimental to the public welfare and will not impede implementation of the general plan, nor the purpose and intent of the provisions for in the zoning ordinance. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission approve the subdivision request, subject to findings and conditions of approval set forth in your draft resolution. And with that, this concludes my presentation. Myself, as well as the applicant, are available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Any questions from commissioners for staff? No. Before I open the public comment period, if there are any public commenters, I'd just like to clarify for the public, get some clarification from our city attorney, kind of to just, if you could, Lauren, to describe our role as a discretionary body in the approval here.
Sure. You may remember a few months ago, the zoning code was changed to streamline approval for certain development projects of a certain size, whereby the actual development the building was approved at the administrative level. However, projects that require subdivisions are still required to have the tentative map come before the Planning Commission for approval. So the process has changed a little bit from what the Planning Commission used to review. And what's before you tonight, as Tony mentioned in his report, is just the map or the subdivision of land. And so the findings with respect to the subdivision have to do with whether the subdivision is consistent with the general plan, whether the site is suitable for this type of development and subdivision of land, whether there's any interference with easements or any create any public health problems. And the types of conditions that are typically imposed on maps have to do with the layout of a subdivision related to easements, construction, utilities, fire, things of that nature. So since we haven't done very many of these under the new process, we thought it would be helpful to just explain what the purview is for tonight.
It is very helpful, thank you. Commissioner Altschul?
Lauren, are the standards still the same for the subdivision as they are if the project was rental?
Could you repeat that question? I didn't hear the end.
In the past, the standards have been the same for subdivision and for a rental apartment building. Are they still
Are you talking
Yes,
about
the
design
same.
standards, Commissioner?
all standards?
Yes, all the standards are the same.
Zoning and
Yes.
design?
And that's what the director looked at when he reviewed the project.
Great, thank you. This is a formality, but do we have any disclosures? No. Okay. The applicant's representative has an opportunity to speak. I believe you have 10 minutes.
Well, no, for the record, my name is Margaret Taylor of Apex LA, and we just, representing the applicant in this case, I just wanted to thank staff for their time and to advise the commission that we have reviewed the staff report and their resolution recommended conditions, and we concur.
Thank you. I'm going to open the public comment period. Do we have any public speakers, David?
We have no public speakers.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and we can discuss, or we can call the question. But I want to close the public hearing before we do that.
Motion by Commissioner Buckner, seconded by Chair Jones.
I'm closing the hearing for the record.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to item 10B, 943 to 945 North Stanley Avenue. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Nora Flynn, our planning intern in the West Hollywood City Hall Planning Department, so welcome.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Nora Flynn, and I'm the planning intern in the current planning division. The item before you is a request for the subdivision of a recently approved 3-story, 5-unit multifamily building over subterranean parking into condominiums. This 6,500 square foot site is located at 943 to 945 North Stanley Avenue, 2 properties south of Romaine Street. Approval of the application will allow the townhouse-style development to be subdivided into multiple ownerships. The building was administratively approved on May 24, 2018 under a development permit after findings were made that the development met all applicable development standards and was consistent with the general plan. It is staff's assessment that the subdivision of this building will not be detrimental to the public welfare and will not impede implementation of the general plan nor the purpose and intent of the provisions of the zoning ordinance. Therefore, staff recommends that the commission approve the subdivision request subject to the findings and conditions of approval set forth in the draft resolution. The applicant is also here, as well as staff, to answer any questions about the application.
Thank you, Nora. Any questions for staff? And City Attorney Lauren, I'm just going to call on you to just clarify that this is the same kind of standards by which we adhered to for item 10A, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We're
Great.
just looking at the subdivision of land.
Great, thank you. No disclosures? Are there any disclosures? No? I'll call the applicant to the podium.
For the record, my name is Margaret Taylor of Apex LA, representing the applicant in this case. We would like to thank all of the staff and welcome to you, who worked on this case with us, and we have reviewed the staff report, and we are in agreement with the conditions of approval.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public speakers, David?
No public comment.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. And we can discuss, or we can move to vote. I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll call the question.
Commissioner Buckner moves, seconded by Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Why is it not letting me vote?
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, David. Item 10C is zone text amendment for outdoor commercial uses above the ground floor.
Are you ready for the presentation?
Yes, thank you. We have the staff report first.
Good evening, Chair Jones and Commissioners. My name is Jerry Hiddleman, Contract Planner. And the item before you tonight is outdoor commercial uses above the ground floor. This is a zone text amendment. And again, it's to consider a zone text amendment to add standards and requirements for an administrative permit for new and expanded outdoor commercial uses above the ground floor. And I think this is very timely that you had the Catch restaurant right before this. Because here are some examples. A restaurant would be under these requirements. Also, this is a retail store with some outdoor displays on the ground floor on their terraces, so that would be subject to this ordinance. Exercise classes on a rooftop would be subject to the ordinance, as well as movies. And I thought the movie theater one was quite unique. Planning Commission, this project has been reviewed by the Planning Commission in May of 2017, and what you recommended at that time was approval of a development permit with a public hearing. In addition to dining areas, which was the original request, you wanted to include outdoor commercial uses. Also, the ordinance should address noise, light, glare impacts to adjacent properties, especially residential, but perhaps commercial in some cases. And the public at that hearing had the same concerns. Also, they were concerned about increased processing time with the development permit review. The City Council reviewed this amendment in June of last year. They were concerned about the processing time and fees. An administrative permit, as you can see, is $1,630 versus the development permit, which is approximately $6,855. And again, they were very concerned about protection of residents from noise and light and glare impacts. And then wanted the amendment to come back to the Planning Commission. So just for a little background, since 2014, there have been 39 requests for outdoor dining permits. It was a little hard to tell how many were above the ground floor, but I think it was about 3 plus or minus. And again, the Catch might have been in there. And we do anticipate some more applications in the future as areas densify. You'll see more applications for rooftop uses. Cities like New York and Toronto and San Francisco have looked at these, adopted these regulations. I just want to point out that we, as you know, we just approved a cannabis ordinance, which also allows outdoor and indoor cannabis lounges. However, under state requirements, cannabis lounges cannot be viewed by the public. So it's a little challenging for them to go on the ground floor. So I've already seen and been asked about doing some cannabis lounges on a rooftop or on a second level where it would not be able to be viewed by the public. Current outdoor dining regulations, just for comparison, is an administrative permit, no public hearing except when it has alcohol service. It would be a conditional use permit. And outdoor dining may be located above the ground floor currently. And an outdoor dining area may be part, and it usually is sometimes part, of a larger commercial project. So the Planning Commission would see those larger projects anyway. So the proposed text amendment would be for new and expanded outdoor commercial uses above the ground floor, and includes all the uses I showed as examples. Director level approval required, and the director may refer to the Planning Commission if there's large public outcry or for other reasons as well. Now, I'm showing here an instance where a commercial use above the ground floor, you can see it's on a terrace in this location, is greater than 100 feet or even within 100 feet, but it is blocked from the adjacent residential across the alley by the commercial building. So you have the intervening building. Typically, these type of uses do not cause light or glare impacts to the residents or noise impacts as well. But if you look at other situations where the commercial use is on a rooftop and within 100 feet of a residence, you can see how that could cause some noise impacts. If there are lights, that could cause light and glare impacts, and so forth. Also, a public hearing would be required if there was a residence that was adjacent to the commercial use and was in with direct line of sight of the, let's say, rooftop use in this instance. So we're elevating this to a public hearing to get public input because there could be greater impacts than if it's blocked by a building. We also included lighting and noise standards. So the lighting shall prevent light and glare to impacts to residential property. An acoustical wall, I guess that's what the Catch restaurant used to prevent noise impacts to their neighbors, and that would be required also for these types of uses. Design standards, we include a landscape plan. Typically, this would be obviously in pots or some type of a built-type landscape environment. And acoustical wall may be approved by the director as well. So the director would approve that design. So the next steps would be Planning Commission comments and recommendations forward to the council, and then City Council adoption. And we're open for questions at this point.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Altschul.
Mr. Hittleman, if the above the ground floor use for a cannabis lounge cannot be used by the public, who can it be used by? Private?
It can be used by the public. You just have to be over 21 years of age, so it's not a private club, although it maybe can be, but these are lounges that could be used by public over 21, just like it is for recreational cannabis. You have to be 21 to purchase that.
Laura?
I think he said it can't be seen from the public. You can't see the activity from out on the sidewalk. You can't be able to see what's being consumed inside.
Oh, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
That's a
It's the
state
same as the
requirement.
use of alcohol, right? The question.
No use of
That
alcohol.
21
provision
years.
applies to alcohol. I know it's in the state law that if you're consuming the cannabis in public, you can't be seen from the right-of-way.
I have a question.
Sure, Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Jerry, could you bring up the second diagram that you had?
Oops.
Yes, thank
That
you.
one, okay.
Can you explain the rationale behind having the measurements start on the front edge of this property instead of the back edge of the rooftop? Because by my calculation, from where people are standing, if they move to the far back side of the building, they're within 10 feet of the property next door, not 100 feet. So can you explain this?
Oh, the intent of this is if there's any outdoor or rooftop commercial use within 100 feet of a residential property, then it has to go to a public hearing.
But the metric is starting at the leading edge, if you will, the street side edge of the public space, of the restaurant or whatever the proposed use is, and not the place where the sound is going to start emanating from on the backside. I'm using Ketch as an example in my brain.
Oh, I see.
So if that's Ketch,
Yes.
and that alleyway is actually Melrose,
Right.
okay, then that measurement is only 10 feet, but not 100 feet from the back edge, you see? So that's my question about what the rationale was for this metric.
Yeah, the drawing is showing one example of a condition, but it is not appropriately illustrating the world of examples. You're right, if even 1 foot of that roof terrace were within 100 feet of the residential property line, it would be subject to this review standard.
Okay, I think then this might need to be modified to reflect that.
Yes, that's a good point.
Okay. As a related question, did you do the measurement from the south side of Ketch to the nearest residence? Because I'm wondering where the 100 feet came from. We know that there were problems relative from Ketch to the nearest residence. So the question is, what is that measurement?
Well, in that case, you have Melrose, and you do have another row of commercial, so it would be much greater than 100 feet. So the Catch restaurant would not fall under this requirement.
Already been entitled anyway, so it wouldn't be.
Well, it's just a scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. So under that scenario, a public hearing would be required? No, it wouldn't.
Would not be
Would not
required.
be, and that's my question for what the genesis of the 100 feet is, because we know we had a problem with Ketch, and there's a scenario then where this could come up again, and it wouldn't have to go to a public hearing because of this 100 feet. Is that the appropriate measurement?
That's, yeah. If we use that standard, it seems like every project would go to a public hearing because it's residential, literally close to all commercial uses.
Right.
Right. Okay, just so I understand. Thank you.
Sorry. On your first diagram, do you have a proposed height for that, from where the people are standing to the rooftop of the back of the building? Because the intent, I'm assuming, is that that is blocking any noise. And so the question is, what is the minimum height requirement for that piece?
There is no minimum height requirement in the draft ordinance right now, but a typical height of a commercial floor-to-ceiling floor would be, I would think, 10 feet plus or minus. So it would typically be 10 feet or more.
So would it be important to identify that and distinguish it from, let's just say, a short parapet or something in terms of the blocking of the noise?
That could be added, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Altschul?
Mr. Hittleman, did you read Ed Levin's comment letter on this item?
I did, yes.
You did? Do you have any comment on it?
Well, that's why we looked up how many projects have been through this process. He was saying that there's not many above the ground level. And it's true, in the past there haven't been, but it seems to be a trend, and like I said, with cannabis lounges, that can
So
happen.
in the past, you've sort of uncovered 3.
What was the other? Yeah, that's exactly.
But you think there's a justification because of prospective uses?
We do, yeah. And as the city densifies, and as you see other cities have had to go to these type of regulations where the rooftops are becoming a very popular use now, not just for dining. So we see that trend also.
But as you said, we've had 39 applications since 2014, and only 3 of these would qualify in part of this. And as part of the new cannabis guidelines, there's only going to be 8 lounges that might be permitted in the city. So if we take that ratio,
Right.
so will there be that many applications that we are trying to sort of shoehorn the situation into these 3 diagrams, and maybe it's not a good fit for all cases that we might want to capture?
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
have a question. Can you just kind of give us a quick primer and for public benefit about how directors' hearings are noticed? As opposed to the way that a planning commission meeting would be noticed for something like this? Sorry to put you on blast. I just would like to clarify that for the public.
And here comes the director.
Hi, John Kehoe, interim director. So directors' hearings that are actually considered public hearings are noticed exactly like planning commission meetings. There's a radius mailing, and I guess it depends on how, there's a radius mailing to everyone. And so
Is it 500 feet?
Yes,
Okay.
it's 500 feet.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Altschul?
Mr. Hiddleman, the cannabis uses are not land use issues. They're licenses. Is it possible to make the use of an upper story for a lounge a license rather than a land use?
Commissioner Etchell, first I'd like to point out that there's actually could be up to 16 cannabis lounges, because they could be affiliated with retail as well or standalone. And we have them also broken out into edible lounges and edible and smoking lounges. So I want just to clarify that first.
Yes.
Yeah.
But could those lounge uses be incorporated into the license rather than made into a conditional use permit?
Well, here's the process they would have to go through for approval. If they are chosen, the applicants, there are 16 applicants are chosen, they would have to get a zoning clearance first. Then they would go to the Business License Commission to get a license, as you're stating. And then the next step after that would be if there are any major improvements, or they're doing an outdoor lounge or building a new building, let's say, they'd have to either go to the Planning Commission for approval or at a director's level permit, whichever is appropriate. So they'd have to go through a number of steps to get approval and to be operational.
What was my thought here?
Were you, Commissioner?
The cannabis uses, as I understand it, have to be renewed annually. Is that so?
That's correct. Through the business license has to be renewed. That's right.
But if the business license is all encompassing of the actual uses that are proposed, such as a lounge on an upper floor, would that also hold true that it would have to be renewed annually?
I would think no, because that is, the land use approvals stand separate from the business license commission. The commission would be the-
Is that practical? Making the lounge on the second floor or an upper floor standing separate in its requirements than the actual use for the cannabis use?
A CUP would run with the land, right?
It would.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So if the cannabis lounge closes, then what?
They could go and they can use it for some other use. They could have a restaurant on the roof. They could do some other.
That would be a change of use, wouldn't it?
Do you see perhaps?
Yeah.
Do you see perhaps people trying to put a lounge in a place where they're actually doing more than lounging in order to avoid the annual renewal?
We'll have to see what the applicants come forward with. We know that some are being very creative, maybe, and putting exercise lounges with cannabis consumption. So, I don't.
I think their creativity will see no bounds.
Right.
Any other questions for staff?
Just one related on the cannabis question and proximity. Has staff got information about secondhand smoke and the dissipation and the range with the cannabis? My concern is, you know, a small child's bedroom is within, you know, smoke range of that rooftop. At what point is it considered dissipated sufficiently to not be impactful to that child?
Yeah, that's a good question. The actual cannabis ordinance states that any odors or any smoke cannot leave their premises or property. So they'll have to figure out how to do some kind of odor control or air quality system to prevent that from happening. And if it does happen, that would be a code enforcement issue.
So that applies to the outdoor spaces, not just the indoor spaces?
Exactly.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, I'm going to open this up to public comment. Thank you, staff. I'm appreciative, Jerry, Bianca, John. We have any public speakers, David?
We have one public speaker, Richard Giesbrecht.
Great, Richard Giesbrecht. For the record, please just state your name, even though I just said it, and your city of residence.
Richard Giesbrecht, City of West Hollywood. I don't know where to begin on the subject of this particular issue. West Hollywood West has suffered for 20 years with problems of noise, going great distances, thousands and thousands of feet. So you're talking 100 feet, and I can only laugh or cry. I wonder, has anybody looked, has a professional acoustical engineer looked at this and advised the planning department about this? It doesn't look like that to me. I have some very, very serious doubts about this whole situation. Historically, we've had problems with the factory. People on Norwich and Huntley could hear the factory when they would open their fire escape door, you know, late at night. At night, sound travels great distances. That's quite a distance. That's a quarter of a mile. And we hear currently noise from Lapeer Hotel, Dresden, or not Dresden Room, but Doheny Room. And we also hear it from, we have been hearing it from Catch, which was a nightmare, which we have all gone through. The owners of Catch should not have gone through that nightmare, and the neighbors should not have gone through that nightmare. Why did it take multiple years to solve a problem? But it wasn't solved. The planning department did not have peer review of the acoustical report that was written. Thus, the problems fell like dominoes. It would be wonderful to adopt this ZTA if that seemed to be the prudent thing to do, but the prudent thing to do is not to. Citizens can't rely upon the city, upon the planning department, for assiduous study of the circumstances, peer review of acoustical reports, understanding of acoustical issues. So we really need a public hearing so the public can come out and scream and yell and talk about this problem. Why do we want to embed one catch after another after another? Why do we want to have this handled as an administrative hearing when history has proven that the planning department has not controlled these matters adequately? Thank you.
Thank you. David, do we have any other public speakers?
No other public speakers. However, we do have a few that have do not wish to speak, but want their review read into the record. They support staff's recommendation of approval. Richard Carlis, Leslie Carlis, and Manny Rodriguez.
Thank you. So I'm going to close the public comment portion of this public hearing and open this up for discussion by the commission. Commissioner Buckner.
I'm concerned. I heard staff say that the director's hearings are noticed the same way as planning commission meetings. However, I don't understand how come we often have a lot of people come to Planning Commission to take speaker slips to address the commission on a particular item, but very few people, as far as I've been told, don't actually appear at a director's hearing. So I'm concerned about these kinds of projects going to director, and there not to be input from the public, that there's a concern about transparency on these projects, particularly where there is likely to be impacts from the commercial use to the residential properties that are close by. So I don't know exactly how to resolve that, but I am very concerned about that, and not sure I could support the project that this would go to director's hearing without it coming, these projects coming to commission for commissioners' review and for the public to be able to participate in the discussions. So that's my view.
Thank you. Rogerio? Commissioner Caballero, sorry.
Yep. As I mentioned before, there's been so few of these projects since 2014. There's only 3 of them. And given the rarity of the projects, and I'm a little concerned that these diagrams and these guidelines will capture all the scenarios that might come up, and it seems like there'll be few scenarios. I would like to, though I support and I appreciate all the work that you guys have done with trying to outline some guidelines that could capture all the scenarios. I think there are so few projects, I think it would be best to have them all come to Planning Commission. And if there are design issues that need to be resolved, they even can come to design subcommittee. But I would feel more comfortable having them all come to Planning Commission, so the public can come and comment, and we can really kind of get into the meat and potatoes of if there might be a problem that could be resolved.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
I would concur. The intent of the directive from council was to make sure that these things were reviewed, approved, modified, and denied through a public hearing process. And to me, the public hearing process includes this commission and the 7 voices that are here, as well as the public. And given that the irony that Catch was on the same agenda does not escape me. And what we all went through is, I just think it was incredibly expensive for the developer, for the owner of the restaurant. If they had done it right the first time with the right protections, et cetera, and if it had gone through a public process, that would have been surfaced. I'm very certain of that. And given the potential for just really nightmare situations for the community as a whole and expensive situations for the developers, I concur with Rogerio that there's just not that many of them. And I think the public process is the best way to vet these. It's how you surface issues. And a single person in a room just doesn't have that same facility. Again, I think some of the diagrams are very limiting. They don't explicitly discuss buildings to the side, buildings across the street in the other direction. I think it needs considerably more work, and in particular to address the underlying issue, which is public involvement in this process.
Thank you. Commissioner Altschul?
I agree with Lynn, and I think that the best and the most excuse me, the most valid way to do this for a catch-type situation is with the public hearing process.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Bass?
I will voice a contrary position then. I support staff's recommendation. I think it accomplishes council's direction, as I read it at least, and so I would support staff's recommendation. I think it goes the right direction.
Thank you. So I have quite a few notes on this. Bear with me, my diary, as Commissioner Altschul calls it, where I keep all of my notes. So I'm generally in agreement with what most everyone else has said. I think this ZTA came before us again in May of 2017 in response to a very specific situation. And there are kind of two parts to this that I want to address. One is the timeline, which I understand. And one is the fee schedule, which I also want to address. I was the forewoman on a jury about 2 years ago, and I was through much eye rolling of my own. My judge kindly explained to the jury that, kind of the role of government isn't necessarily to be efficient, it's to be fair. And it's to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to give feedback. And for that reason, I feel very strongly that this kind of request, especially when requested after the fact, which essentially amounts to an intensification or a re-intensification of use, is something that should be heard by us. And it's not really about us, it's about giving the public an opportunity to voice their opinions and their concerns about outdoor rooftop spaces. I think anytime, especially given that it seems to me anyway that this would be geared mostly toward after the fact conversion, I don't know that we want to, I don't know if maybe I'm thinking about this in the wrong way, but I don't want to kind of codify a way to fast track this. Like, if you're coming back after the fact to ask for a change in use or an additional use, I feel that it should have due kind of process and that everyone should have an opportunity to participate. So where I netted out with this was that, any outdoor use above the ground floor should be reviewed by Planning Commission because it's essentially what amounts to intensification of the use. And if, applicants and staff feel that there's an undue financial burden, that there's a possibility for us to look at a fee schedule for re-intensification. I recognize that that's not really our purview, and I know that there are explicit fees for development permits, but that's where I'm at with this. I just feel like this is written, and I understand this may not be the intent, but to make it easier to do projects like, I'll just say it, catch, even though that's not the intent. So again, that's where I'm at with this, and I'm open to further discussion. So, Commissioner Buckner.
I'd like to just make a motion.
Okay.
And I'd like to make a motion.
Wait, it looks like we have a motion on the floor. Did you move?
Oh, okay, go ahead. Then I don't know what it is.
Do you want to
but I might
withdraw your
second
motion, or
it.
do you want to let Sue motion?
I would like to make a motion that the text that this body approved a year ago in May be the text that we recommend to council, and that is, in fact, that all uses above ground, especially that have light and sound and other impacts on the community, go to Planning Commission.
So you're going to make
I believe you mean you want to direct, the motion should direct staff to bring back a resolution saying.
Yes,
in other words, you also are denying, basically.
denying the staff report. That would be my
And not
motion.
recommending that the staff report denied.
I'll second
Correct.
that.
The motion passes, 5 ayes, noting Commissioner Bass voting no.
So-
Thank you.
So the resolution's going to be brought back to us?
Yes, it will.
Next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 11, new business, there is none. Item 12A, which was previously moved up to just before the public hearings. Item 13, excluded consent calendar, there is none. Item 14A, items from staff, planning manager's update.
Nothing this evening, thanks.
Great, thank you, Bianca. Item 15 is public comment. Do we have any public speakers?
Yes, we have one. George Biarski, please.
George Biarski. If you could please come to the podium and state your name and city of residence.
Good evening, Commissioners. George Briarski, residing in West Hollywood. My comments will relate to the application for 937-947 Spalding Street at the last meeting. Initial comment, more a general application maybe. The initial comment, as it was noted, was that the developer had already received 2 concessions. And yes, the first concession was for a 4th floor, completely incongruous with the community, in exchange for 5 affordable units. And it stayed that way, including through the design review committee's meeting. And then, if you remember, the application was withdrawn because of need to settle certain things. And then when it returned, the application was for 4 affordable units, not 5. So maybe a little facetiously, the question might be, how many affordable units do you need for a 4th floor? It seems to change all the time. The major comment is with respect to the applicant's request for a waiver from the setback provisions, for the property. I'd like to thank Commissioner Bass for actually pointing attention to the wording of Municipal Code 1960-040-C, which spells out the requirements for the granting of a waiver. And basically, that's upon a finding, in this case by the Commission, of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances applicable to the property involved. Not other properties, the property involved. And okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Biarski. Richard Giesbrecht?
Richard Giesbrecht, City of West Hollywood. I wanted to make some additional comments about the issue of rooftop decks and so forth. I've been a professional architect for nearly 40 years. I've worked on many different kinds of circumstances with acoustical engineers, and I've studied some about it. I have some working experience. I don't claim to be an expert. My concern is that if the city and the appropriate departments were sufficiently trained, and if the process were strictly controlled and adhered to, and the acoustical reports were peer-reviewed by outside acoustical consultants, we would have a much better outcome across the board. Then the public could really rely upon the department. So when things came before the Planning Commission, it would be a slam dunk. I'm all for reducing costs of the developers. They're huge, they're horrible, they're unnecessary. If the in-house work is done at the city. But the public can't, and that's really unfortunate. And that's why a public hearing may be necessary. How many hours have you spent on things like this? 28 hours, 30 hours a night per meeting? And then the staff hours, hundreds. And the public hours, hundreds. A really good acoustical report that would have addressed catch would be in the thousands. When you weigh the costs of all the hours you, the public, staff, has put into the catch problem versus a few $1,000s in a well-written acoustical report submitted to the city and peer-reviewed by a consultant. It's almost insignificant, the big picture. Why do we have to waste so much time? Well, as was pointed out earlier this evening, government isn't necessarily efficient, but I mean that's a really gross inefficiency, and it doesn't serve the populace well. It wastes your time, and there are far more problematic issues for you to wrestle with than something that is not an exact science. There's an art to acoustics, but it's pretty well understood. So why not do all the homework up front? Why not have the planning department, the building department, whoever comes to bear on the problem, do their job before the project comes before the public? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giesbrecht. Do we have any other public speakers, David?
No more public speakers.
Thank you. I'll move on to items from commissioners. Anything?
Yes.
Oh, Commissioner Altschul.
I think referring to the catch progress as a negative is wrong. I think referring to the catch progression is an example of good government. It's a new, innovative type of a restaurant. It brings tremendous amount of people to West Hollywood to enjoy eating in a Class A 5-star restaurant. And it took a while to get the thing straightened out on a noise issue that had affected very few people. And I say it affected very few people because it was the same very few people who came and helped us work it out. But it got worked out. And it got worked out to the advantage of everybody, and I'm very thrilled. And I think it shows a wonderful example of how this government, the city of West Hollywood's government, works to everybody's advantage. And I think most people in West Hollywood West are thrilled with the status of the business community here in West Hollywood West and with the values in West Hollywood West.
Thank you. Any other, Commissioner Caballero?
Yes, we moved so quickly through some of the first items. I actually did have a comment on the zone tax amendment to establish a top floor setback. I just wanted to kind of let you know what my comment is. On item 9A, Exhibit A, at the bottom you call out design guidelines. And I was hoping we could strike design guidelines because they're very subjective. I'd like to come up with something more formulaic and exacting. Calling it something like a facade modulation standard would be a more successful outcome than leaving something that's subjective. So I just wanted to get that out there.
For the purposes of the record, are we allowed to comment on that? And because they were on consent.
The decision's already been made, but I think staff heard, and as it processes through council, if there's a better term, they can.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Your comment is heard, but it won't be part of a formal recommendation from the commission because that's.
Yep, thank you.
Been made.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? I just have one. It's for staff and mostly for David. David, you do so much for us. It's recently been brought to my attention that for people who are speaking in the audience, whether it's an applicant or a public comment, it's very hard for people to see once it becomes, I think, yellow and then red up on the screen. More than one person has surfaced this with me. Is there something that can we look into making it easier for people to understand how much time they have left?
Yeah, I've had a conversation with the city clerk's office,
Okay.
and that's on their agenda.
Okay.
So it's in the process.
Okay, great.
It's part of an upgrade.
Okay.
So when
Oh,
it'll happen,
excellent.
we're not sure, but it's in the works.
Okay, great, thank you. And again, for anyone who came in late, I just want to note that if you had any issues with the parking validation, you can get a follow-up ticket that will.
One more comment
Oh.
before we close the meeting.
Sure, sure, go ahead, Commissioner.
I don't
Becker.
know who decided to send us our staff reports bound and neat. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because it helps us keep it all together. So if this is just something from one time, I would like you to consider doing this going forward. Except when I guess they're giant, I make it difficult, but I really appreciated it. Thank you, whoever did it.
Thank you. Any other
David.
comments? If not, I will go ahead and move to item 17, adjournment of this meeting. We will adjourn to our regularly scheduled meeting on Thursday, September 6th, beginning at 6:30 PM right here in West Hollywood Park Public Meeting Room, Council Chambers. Thank you for coming tonight.